Hi everyone, my name is Alex Holt and I'm a school psychologist with MFNERC. Thank you for joining us for part 4 of our series on emotions and the brain. So today I'm going to be speaking about emotion regulation. As a reminder, we have already had 3 videos in our series. If you've not had a chance to watch these videos, I'd recommend going back and watching them, as the content we'll talk about today really builds on the previous videos. So in our latest video, we had Erin speak about the fight, flight, freeze response. So this is an automatic body response that we all have, and it goes off when we detect a real or a perceived threat. So in the last video, she spoke about what this can look like in a child, and then also how it can affect them at school and in their ability to think. So we will be building on that today by speaking about emotion regulation. So basically, what do we do once we've set off that fight, flight, freeze response? How do we manage that? We have 4 questions to answer in this video. So what is emotion regulation? Why is it important? When is it used? And how is it developed? Our first question, what is emotion regulation? This is the ability to effectively manage our emotions. And that word manage is key here. We all have emotions, and our goal is never to get rid of emotions altogether. What our goal is, though, is to manage our emotions and make sure they are balanced so that we can still have productive days. So just like a thermostat, we may have times where we want to upregulate our emotions and increase the intensity. So if I was having a day and I was feeling pretty sluggish, I was feeling pretty down, but I was expected to go present in front of a big group of people, that might be a time I really want to upregulate my emotions. I want to get myself amped up. I want to be excited because I'd like to be an engaging presenter. However, there's also times where we want to downregulate and decrease the intensity of our emotions. So I'm on my way to work and I'm having a great day, and then somebody kind of goes right in front of me and cuts me off. Right away, I might feel frustrated, I might feel angry, and my emotions might get a little bit higher. That might be a time though, because I'm on my way to work, where I really want to manage that frustration, manage that anger, decrease the intensity so that I can still go to work and I can still have a good rest of my day. So like I said, the goal is never to avoid the emotion or get rid of it completely. Rather, the goal is to manage the experience of that emotion. So why is emotion regulation important? Well, lots of research has shown there is a close connection between our state of arousal and our ability to learn. So in other words, when we're very out of balance in our emotions, we're either too upregulated, let's say too hyperactive, too excited, or we're too downregulated. Maybe we're too sluggish, too depressed. It's going to be difficult to learn. So this is extremely relevant when we think of children in the school setting. Their higher level cognitive abilities, as all of ours do, rely on having that regulated emotional functioning. We think back to one of our first videos on parts of the brain. Jessica talked about how when our emotions, our amygdala take over, so that's that barking dog, when that dog takes over, we cannot access our thinking brain. So that's our prefrontal cortex ego. When those emotions are in the way, it is very hard to think and be logical, which then affects our ability to learn. So when do we use emotion regulation? Really, we use emotion regulation all the time. We're always kind of regulating and balancing our emotions to make sure we're feeling our best. I would say the time where it is the most relevant is when we see children or adults flip their lid. So again, this is a video Jessica spoke about where when our amygdala and our barking dog goes off, we can't access this thinking part of our brain. Emotion regulation becomes useful when we want to put our lid back on and we want to access that thinking part of our brain. So when a child has flipped their lid, this is when we want to regulate that emotion. What's really important to note though is while it would be ideal if all children could naturally just put their lid back on, that's not the case. Adults must help children put their lid back on many times over and over again before they're going to be able to do that skill independently. So this really leads us into the next concept we're going to talk about, which is co-regulation. So how do we develop these skills in emotion regulation? How do we get that lid back on? Well, we actually need to teach these skills to children and adolescents. Not going to come natural to everybody, and it's not always going to be intuitive to all kids. So there are going to be children who are going to need more explicit support and teaching in this area in order to regulate their emotions. So the way we develop this is through the connections we have with reliable caregivers. So it all comes down to relationships, relationships, relationships. I cannot say that enough times. That is incredibly important when we're talking about emotion regulation. So in this case, a reliable caregiver can be anyone who is an adult who provides support and care to a child. So it could be their parent, it could be another family member such as a grandparent, it could be a classroom teacher, an educational assistant, basically anyone who works and supports and spends a lot of time with that child has a role in developing those emotion regulation skills. So this is where the concept of co-regulation comes in. Basically, this means it's a process in which a responsive adult models regulation skills and guides children through big emotions. Basically, helping a child put that lid back on, helping them move through that emotion so they can go about their day and it doesn't totally ruin everything for them in that moment. So children are always watching, they're always picking up on what adults do. So a big part of this is just modeling your own emotion regulation and management. Kids will pick up on that and they will notice how we deal with our emotions and how we manage them. So the process of co-regulation typically comes before self-regulation. So the ultimate goal, again, is we would love it if children and teenagers were mostly independent in this ability to manage and regulate emotions. However, in order to make it to that place of self-regulation, we need to go through this co-regulation many times. The more times we do the process of co-regulation with a child or a teenager, the more automatic and independent they will become in that process. So what actually happens is the more times you do something, your brain creates a pathway where it helps that behavior become more automatic and easy in the future. So when you are using specific words with a student or specific actions, through that co-regulation process, children are actually internalizing all of that information. And so when they're moving into self-regulation, they're almost repeating it back to themselves and they're relying on those same words and those same skills that you're modeling and using with them in order to practice that self-regulation. So I just want to be very clear here as well that while I'm talking about this idea of co-regulation before self-regulation, this is a very interactive process. So it's not like just because you master co-regulation, you're always in self-regulation. Children can be needing different pieces of this depending on the situation, depending on the day they're having, depending on lots of different factors. So this, again, I should say, is not an age-dependent process. Just because you become of a certain age doesn't mean you're always going to be able to self-regulate. So we sometimes see this in the schools where children have not had the opportunity when they're younger to go through this co-regulation process. So even though the child might be 15 or 16 years old and we might expect them to be able to manage their emotions, my point is we can't have that expectation. They maybe didn't have those experiences where they've been able to develop that self-regulation skill, and they might be needing some of that co-regulation just like younger students are. So this brings us to the end of our video on emotion regulation. Next time, we will be talking about co-regulation in greater detail and some of the specific strategies that we can use, as well as what it really looks like in practice. So 3 things we'll talk about next video are name it to tame it, connect and redirect, and move it to lose it. So thank you for joining me for part 4, and I will see you for part 5.